name is Suzette Koval.
I'm the Commercial Banking Business Development Officer with Farmers and Merchants Bank. I'm still the past chair of the chamber, but I'm still here. At this time, I'd like to ask you, if you haven't already, to please silence or turn off your cell phones. The Legislative Committee of the Chamber has a long tradition of reviewing proposed legislation and taking a pro-business stand by writing letters to our delegation and to the chairs of the various Senate and House committees in Annapolis. This year, our very active Legislative Committee wrote about 80 letters protecting business interests in Carroll County and the state of Maryland. If you would like to participate in this critically important chamber committee, please see Mike McMullen. They start meeting in mid-January 2020 and run through the end of March. If you are a current member of our legislative committee, please stand and be recognized. As I recognize elected and appointed officials, please stand when your name is called. Members of our Carroll delegation, Senator Justin Reedy, and I'm sorry if you're eating. Delegate Haven Shoemaker. Delegate April Rose. And Delegate Susan Krebs. I'd also like to recognize the president of Carroll Community College, Dr. James Ball. And the president of McDaniel College, Roger Casey. And would the past chairs of the Chamber Board please stand and be recognized. Lynn Wheeler, Director Emeritus, Carroll County Public Library. Steve Aquino, Aquino Financial Group. Dave Bollinger, Barnes Bollinger Insurance. Ben Yingling, Crawford Yingling Insurance. And Steve Wance, Carroll Community College. Have I missed anyone? Okay. And would the current board of the Carroll County Chamber please stand and be recognized? Joining us today are students from Carroll Community College majoring in business or accounting with their professor and program director, Marlene Titus. Please stand. Okay, now I would like to ask Dana Blum to please come up here. We'll start the program. So if our delegation can come to the front, Dana. If you could come up. Dana is the chair of the Chamber's Legislative Committee, and she'll be kicking things off for us.
Good afternoon again. It's been a busy 3 months, I believe, or so in the General Assembly this year, and our delegation will tell us a little bit about that. I'm going to ask the delegation in turn to introduce themselves, tell us their district, and give us the highlight or the hot topic that they think was covered in this year's General Assembly. And hopefully we'll have some time for questions from all of you. So I think, as usual, to my immediate left, we're going to start with Delegate Krebs. If you'd like to go up here, sorry, and use this mic since we don't have one at the table.
We didn't organize who was going to say what. I'm Delegate Susan Krebs, and I represent District 5, which was most of Carroll County and all of you. And I know most of you, except for the students that are here. And welcome, and I will tell you my major was business and accounting, and it's done well for me. So stick with it, and welcome to the Chamber. We had a very interesting year this year. It was an election year, and we had 60 new members of the legislature out of 188, so that's a large portion. We had 72 record number of women in this year, record for Maryland, which was interesting. And so it was a lot of a learning curve. And we also had our Speaker of the House, who was ill. As you heard, he passed away one Sunday, and that made it very difficult end of session, very difficult session for him, who tried to struggle through and be our leader, but just couldn't quite get there. So it's been a challenge. But despite that, we were able to accomplish a lot. I always say sometimes we accomplish things by killing bad bills, but we'll tell you a few of the things that I'm going to tell you what we did on my committee. Since I don't know what you guys want to talk about, I'll leave your issues up to you. But I serve on the Health and Government Operations Committee, and that committee takes care of everything to do with health care, nursing homes, hospitals, rate setting, all the health occupations, all insurance, health insurance, all the estates and trust, funeral issues, cemetery issues, all government operations, procurement, University of Maryland Medical System, Board of Directors, which I'll get to. So anything to do with government operations or with anything to do with healthcare, we cover, which has been, we had a pretty rigorous year this year, and we worked very long hours. One of the things we passed that might be of interest to you, we passed a bill, state government regulations impacting small business. And how many of you are small business people? Many of you. Well, as you know, the regulations just keep piling on and piling on. It's like, I don't know how you keep up with it. In my past life, I was an accountant for small businesses, and I worked for big business as well. And I'm not sure if I would know today how to guide our businesses when there are just so many regulations for a small business to need to know what to do. So the governor put forth a bill basically saying for every new regulation that is proposed, they're going to have to do an economic impact statement to say, how is the juice worth the squeeze for this small business? And it's something that sounds pretty common sense, but we haven't been doing it. And that way we'll have to sit back and say, hey, is this really something we need, or does it just feel good and sound good? So that's a very big piece of legislation that I hope will help to stem the tide, and then hopefully look at regulations that we already have in place and what can we get rid of to make it easier to do business in the state of Maryland. Another big issue we've had this year and around the state is healthcare costs. How many of you care about healthcare costs? It should be everybody. And specifically, how do we make sure we have access to affordable healthcare and affordable healthcare, and also make sure people have access. So a big issue has been drug affordability. So there was a big push this year to do prescription drug pricing board, which sounds nice. They're going to put caps on what you're going to pay on certain prescription drugs, very high cost drugs. The problem is sometimes it's unconstitutional to do some of these things, and it's also, it would limit, if we just did it for state government employees, it would limit sometimes access to care for some of our government employees. So we passed a bill that was very watered down. We're going to try to just look and say, how do we get transparency with prescription drug costs so that we can start to figure out where the problem is. What, is it the manufacturers? Is it the pharmacy benefit managers? It's a very, very complex issue, how we do pricing with drugs and how they're manufactured in the country and across the world. So I think the federal government's working on that, and we're trying to do something about that. But government limits sound good on paper, but in reality it just doesn't work. So that's a very big issue we've been working on. We also had a bill for an individual mandate for health insurance. And as you know, part of the Affordable Care Act had an individual mandate. You must have insurance or you paid a fee or fine. And they got rid of that, eliminated that as of January 1st of this year. They stopped enforcing it last year. So the state of Maryland, in their wisdom, said, hey, let's just pick up where the federal government left off, and we will impose an individual mandate for the state of Maryland for people that don't have insurance. And we'll use it as a down payment for them to pay for insurance. And I was involved in the work group on that with the Speaker's office, and I said, you know, most people want insurance. Most people want health care. I don't know anybody that doesn't want it. And the reason that they don't get it is because they can't afford it. So forcing someone to buy something that they can't afford is, to me, not fair. So after cooler minds prevailed and cooler heads prevailed, and I gave an example of two people making $52,000 a year, $104,000 for a family. If they go through the Affordable Care Act, their policy for their family would cost $18,000 a year with a $5,000 deductible. Well, tell me how that is affordable. And it's not. And that's why people are hesitating from buying insurance, because of the affordability. And many of the people that are making these rules, me being one of them, but they work for the government and they've always had insurance. They have good insurance, and they just don't realize that they're in your shoes trying to buy insurance on their own and what it really costs. So instead of doing the individual mandate or down payment that they called it, it would have been a $795 fee for each person in the family that did not have the insurance. They decided to put a check off on the tax return to say yes or no, I have insurance, and then get the people that run the Maryland Health Exchange to call folks up and try to guide them into the proper program, whether it's Medicaid or if they can find them a better program. So that's more reasonable. So that's something else that we did in our committee this year. A couple of disappointments that I had, and I've talked to you about this before, is that we had a good budget situation this year, and the governor's done a very good job of trying to rein in some of the spending and put money where our priorities are. But last year when the federal government reformed the tax code, I guess you've all done your taxes, or if you haven't, you have 4 more days until Monday to get your taxes in. But it was a big change in how the federal government calculated taxes, and they simplified returns, lowered rates, but they took away a lot of deductions, and it sort of made things easier. Some people were winners, some people were losers, and you should probably know that by now if you've done your taxes. But in Maryland, we did not adjust our tax code to allow, we align with the federal code, and it's complicated to explain, but because we did not change the way we do our tax code in Maryland, there was an unintended consequence that people would be paying more in Maryland taxes if they are people that itemize their deductions or have business expenses, and that's as simple as I can say it. We tried to get that change last year, myself, the governor, and a lot of other people. All of us were big supporters of that. 2 of my colleagues sit on the tax writing committee, and we had lots of effort to try to change that. We did that again this year, and the money that was coming in was too, I guess it was too much of an addiction to spend this money. It's an extra $400 million, no, $400 or $600 million. $400 million for the state of Maryland and about $250 million for the locals, the counties and the municipalities. So it became a little too, became a little greedy, and we did not fix the tax code. So 1 in 10 Marylanders will see their taxes rise, and hopefully that's total taxes between state and federal. But about a quarter of Marylanders will pay more state taxes. And you got to really look at your return and say, not what did I get back, because that doesn't matter what your refund is, even though you like a refund. It matters what did you pay last year and what did you pay this year in total taxes, both federal and state, and compare those. And most people are going to be winners overall. 1 in 10 will not be winners, but on the Maryland return itself, you're going to be, a quarter of the people will be losers. And most of those people are dual income couples. So just keep that in mind. We've tried to fix that, and we did not have the support we needed from the legislature. One other issue that I'll talk about before I'll turn it over to my colleagues, we had a big scandal on the University of Maryland Medical System Board in the last couple of weeks. That all comes to my committee, and it had to do with board governance, and I don't know if you've heard of the Healthy Holly book series and the Mayor of Baltimore. Won't get into the details, but many of you in this room sit on boards, including me, and we need to make sure our governance is in order, because we have a very large University of Maryland medical system. It's a multi-billion-dollar agency that's grown over years and years. It gets quite a bit of money from the state, and has over the years over the last, I guess, 15 years, they've got about $430 million from taxpayers in the state of Maryland. And it's a board appointed by former governors and current governor. And there were obviously some conflicts of interest despite the disclosures that were put out there. So I think all boards, all of us need to be looking at our governance policies and making sure that we have things in place. And you're not going to, this is not the end of this, you're going to hear more and more about it coming up. I do believe that there will be jail term for some people. I do know the mayor of Baltimore is resisting resigning, and one reason could be because she wants to have a plea bargain with somebody and not go to jail. But this is serious business, what has happened at the University of Maryland. So we focused on that the last 2 weeks in our committee, trying to write legislation to revamp the board, bring in a forensic auditor and performance auditor, get a governance consultant in to make sure that the policies at their board and lots of others are adequate to govern. So we've been busy, and I have a great team here to work with, and our favorite part of the session is coming home. I always say that every year to Carroll County. We love where we live. We are a great county, and we function well. Our business community is wonderful, and we love getting back here. And I'll get a little pitch that we laid cards on your table because we have a great event of Taste of Carroll for Carroll Hospice, and I know most of you are coming. It's a great event on April the 29th. It's at the hospital, and if you haven't been, you'll love it. So pick up your cards, and thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Krebs. Senator Reedy, would you like to join us, please?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having us today and for this lunch. I took a little walk around campus by accident because I went to the location the last time because I didn't look at what was on my calendar. So I'm glad to be here. It's a beautiful room, and it's great to see all of you. Delegate Krebs is absolutely right. The best part about the session is midnight on sine die when it dings, and we know that that no more can be done to the business community than has already been done, frankly. But we're very happy to be home. It was not an easy session by any means. I'm not going to touch on a couple of the big elephants that are in the room because I think Delegate Rose and Delegate Shoemaker may talk some more about the minimum wage when they come up. And but it was very much a very difficult session for us because what happened in the 2018 elections is that Governor Hogan was reelected, but we kind of had a split decision because we lost seats in the House of Delegates, and we actually netted one seat in the Senate, but we were hoping to net more than that. And what happened is in a lot of the seats that are held by the majority party, the Democratic Party, a lot of more moderate members who were they still were more liberal than maybe I am, but they were more moderate, they're gone. They were either beaten in primaries or they retired. And so what we have, and it mirrors what's happening nationally, where you have this really hard-edged sort of economic and social justice crowd that believes that we should use government and the tax code and regulation as a way to try to force things that could happen more naturally if we allowed for more economic freedom to happen. So we dealt with a whole lot of those issues this session. And in the midst of the session, we had both of our presiding officers, the Speaker and the Senate President, were ill. Obviously, Speaker Bush passed away, and that was a very sad thing for us at the end of session. Then we also had the mayor of Baltimore engulfed in a scandal. I know Delegate Krebs talked about the bill that was passed, which was a very good bipartisan bill. It was actually something we worked together on in both the Senate and the House, and both parties, to be sure that there's more transparency for how literally hundreds of millions of our taxpayer dollars are being spent by the University of Maryland medical system. But when I heard how much those children's books were going for, I said to my staff, hold all my calls. I'm working on my autobiography today. I haven't found any takers yet, but I do have two college presidents here, so maybe we'll talk offline. But it's embarrassing, really, and so we're happy that that was something we did move to take quick action on. I sit on the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee, and this year, while we don't get as many business issues, we do get some. We get a lot dealing with state contracts, with contractual law, and with rules of the road, and car insurance type issues, and we also get medical malpractice issues, which of course have a big impact on our healthcare costs and our economy. This year, actually, we reached what I thought was sort of like Middle East peace. We had the Hospital Association, the Doctors, MedChi, the Doctors Association, the Trial Lawyers Association, and other groups that came together to resolve a long-standing conflict on expert witnesses at trials, and I will not get into the nitty-gritty of that, but it was something that was a big bone of contention that was always, the trial lawyers particularly always wanted to water those rules down, and we reached a compromise that I think is very fair. And so that was a positive development that I think does relate to some of the business issues we have here relative to healthcare costs. Our committee also dealt with firearm legislation. We dealt with assisted suicide. We had a number of other issues that came before our committee, and many times very close votes. A lot of amendments that we would put on bills to maybe make them stronger or make them not as damaging. So we spent a lot of time in our committee on, frankly, we spent about 15 hours on the assisted suicide legislation, and we spent a lot of time on firearm legislation, which actually, in the end of the day, most of the firearm bills did not end up making it through the General Assembly because of disagreements between the two houses. So that was something that, while I know it doesn't relate specifically to business, I know is of interest to many in the room. Just looking back on the session, one of the good things is that we did not have any tax increases, which is good, which is something to remark upon in Maryland when we don't have increases in fees and taxes. The budget is balanced, the state budget is balanced moving forward, although we do see trouble signs on the horizon. And we know, I think a lot of you in here that probably are a lot smarter than I am on these kind of issues know that our economy does have in the next couple of years could very likely go into a small recession. And what does that do? We already had this year a revenue write-down for the state where we had less money coming than we expected. We were able to, thankfully, because frankly, Governor Hogan's been very wise about keeping money aside and making sure we have rainy day funds, we were able to balance the budget without that causing a huge problem for this year. But when we look at the possibility of more and more spending for new things in education and other areas, we really are, because of the bent of the General Assembly, as I mentioned earlier, we have to watch. There's a group of people, there's an ideology that believes that business owners, working families, that people always have a little more money that they can give to the government to help make things fair for everybody. And that's the idea, that's the philosophy behind it. And we saw that even with the minimum wage debate. And the problem with that is, as you constrict, it's always the least efficient way to distribute your money is to run it through a government program. And we do need government programs for a lot of things that we have to do together, we need to do together. And I know there are people here that are working in our government agencies and quasi-governmental agencies doing good work. But my concern is that if we come back next year or the next couple years, that the General Assembly is going to want to raise taxes dramatically, and it will see even more difficulty. It'll be even more difficult to have the kind of private sector job growth and the kind of business friendliness that we need so that we can grow jobs and have our economy improve. I'll just leave you with this. It was sort of interesting. The last night of session, I actually got a bill through that I've been working on really hard, dealing with protecting pregnant women from assault. It passed with the House. Thank you to my colleagues for helping me with the bill. We passed the House. The final version passed the House with like 6 minutes to go before we adjourned for session. So very happy about that. But as I look back on the session, the last day made me feel kind of good because I got something through I was working on, and we defeated a couple bills that I didn't like. But you look back on the session, really, when you look at there's a Green Jobs Act that passed that's trying to take make us get a certain percentage, up to 50% of our energy from renewable sources by, I think it's 2030, which is not going to happen without a massive amount of subsidization. And it doesn't include things like nuclear power that would actually help us get there faster. They call it a jobs bill. But all it's doing is creating jobs in places where they're manufacturing solar panels, which is not Maryland. Largely because we don't do as much manufacturing here because we have so many environmental regulations and so many regulations on that. So it's frustrating to see the national political movement sort of try to run test runs in Maryland. So my concern moving forward is that the next 3 years could hold more of this kind of behavior. My daughter had drawn me a picture when I got home from session about a week ago, and it was she's been reading about the Titanic, and she had this picture of the Titanic sinking in the water, which I thought was a little morbid. We have to work with her on making sure she has maybe a little bit brighter artistic taste. But I thought to myself, that's kind of like what the session's been like from an economic perspective. So I hate coming home and bringing bad news, but I am concerned. We stopped some bad things from happening, and we were able to make some progress in some key areas. And as I said, there were no tax increases. But I am concerned moving forward about what the makeup of the General Assembly will be. We have some people in the General Assembly that like to say that they're socialists now, openly, publicly. I don't know that they really know what that means, but they say it. And so it's just a lot. I am concerned. So we want to try to continue to be your voice in Annapolis. We really appreciate the opportunity to come speak to you today. And of course, feel free to ask questions or talk with us offline, and we're happy to help with any issues and concerns that you have. Thanks a lot.
Delegate Rose.
Thank you. Thank you. It is great to be home, and it's great to be here today on this beautiful day. I was chatting with Justin yesterday, and you want to try to be positive, but from my perspective, and he kind of agreed, I felt like this was one of the worst sessions since we've been down there. I just had that feel to it, and I think a lot of it is because some of these newer folks that are now serving are really far left. And so that's been something interesting to deal with, a different perspective. Some of the old guard that was there, as Justin mentioned, were, probably center left, but a little bit more reasonable that you could work with. So won't try not to be too negative, but there were a lot of things. I serve on Ways and Means with Delegate Shoemaker. We both serve on the Education Subcommittee. And so probably the biggest thing we did this year was Kerwin. And we had many meetings about this, a lot of work group work about it. You know, ultimately, I couldn't support it. There were good things in it. It certainly had good ideals, but the #1 mandate of Kerwin in the first place was to fix the funding formula, and especially for us in Carroll, that's extremely important. That kind of went by the wayside, and they really went into a very large, comprehensive bill that deals with education. There will be some matching funds, grant funds available for teacher salaries. But that is going to require buy-in from the county to be able to do that, and we've talked about that, and I think that there hopefully are some ways to make that work, and that will be a positive. Something that I was very concerned about was the mandated spending in Kerwin, not only for this year, which we really did have the money in the budget for this year. Next year, there's also a very large, I think it was 355 million, Haven, 355 million for next year. We think we'll be able to pay for that, but as Justin mentioned, and I think Susan mentioned, you know, we've already had one write-down from the budget forecast, and with the financial forecast looking forward a few years, we kept hearing, well, let's get it done this year, and then we'll do the big bill next year. And when we ask questions about, well, how are we going to take care of this funding and these mandates and things on the out years, well, we'll just have to keep, you know, passing more bills. And I don't really think that's a good way to do long-term policy. So that was very frustrating. One good thing in it, the governor has been trying to get an inspector general for oversight in the school systems, and that was put into the bill, so that is a positive. And hopefully, as we hear about all of these, it seems like every day there's another scandal with in another arena. So hopefully, with the large amount of money that is going to be allocated in this program, we will have good oversight. So that's a positive. While working in education on the subcommittee there, I've really become passionate about really teaching our kids practical, useful skills so that they can be successful in the workforce. I mean, that's why they're in school. And so we really worked a lot on that. I put in several bills that had to do with education. I feel strongly that we should be funding more into the Career and Tech Center. I know you've all heard me talk about this many times. We actually did try to get creative with all of this Kerwin money that was going to be obviously discussed. I put a bill in that would have earmarked $48 million of that for Career and Tech Centers so that every single county would get $2 million to implement in whichever way that they could use it. And they would not go along with that, unfortunately. But you know, we talked a lot about local control when we were having the big fight about the school calendar. And you know, but when you talk about local control so we can control our own money and do with it with our education money how we would like to, they don't really want to hear about that. I also put a bill in to double the 529 deductions that you can use to save for school. They weren't really interested in that either because of the large fiscal note. But apparently a large fiscal note for Kerwin is okay. And then also to start teaching the fundamentals of construction, even beyond just our career and tech school, because as we all know, we don't have very limited space. We really need to be able to have these opportunities to teach kids and expose them to all areas of the workforce at an early age so they can really get maybe excited about what they'd like to do in life. But the education, the State Board of Education does not like to have curriculum dictated to them, so that didn't go anywhere either. And then, you know, again, thinking about kids and giving them opportunities, I put in a bill that would allow a deduction for hiring interns, high school and career interns for small businesses. You know, that's something sometimes the big businesses have a budget to do those types of things, but I think there's a lot of small businesses that would benefit from bringing in these young people, teaching them some really great skills, and it also gives young people a great opportunity. They have limited time if they're playing a sport or whatever they have going on with their schoolwork, and if they have to choose with a paid position or a free internship, you know, sometimes they really need to make the money. So if they could have an opportunity to get a small stipend to work and learn some skills, I think that would be a good thing. So I'm going to certainly keep trying to work on those things next year. And the last thing I'll touch on, probably the worst bill to me as far as the business community, was the minimum wage. the minimum wage bill. We had a very, very lengthy discussion on the House floor. I'm sure you did on the Senate side as well. And we tried to put in as many reasonable amendments as we could. One that I thought was particularly important was the regionalization amendment, which would have allowed different areas of the state to kind of tailor the minimum wage that would make sense to that area. You know, Montgomery County is a very rich county. Compare it to Carroll County, you're not talking, you know, apples to apples. And, you know, we brought up, and it's not just Carroll, but certainly in Carroll, you know, we border Pennsylvania, and it is so easy for a company to make the decision. You know, we keep passing these anti-business pieces of legislation, and it's really not that far to just headquarters, you know, put your headquarters in Hanover, go right across the line, and not have to put up with this stuff. And we brought up these things. You know, I had many, many businesses reach out to me over this session and say, please don't do this to us. We cannot afford this. I had a company that they do, you know, and again, it's the different philosophy. I think there's just this general philosophy, if the government doesn't tell you to do the right thing, businesses won't do it. And that's just not so. Everybody in here knows that. And, you know, I had a company, and they may move their headquarters. They hire people, they keep it they have a small number. I think they have 18 employees now. They provide full health care coverage, even without the bill that we mandated last year. They provide that. They do very well by their employees, but by passing this, they are not going to be able to hire new people, and they may have to move across state lines. And it's unfortunate. And, you know, even when you go into Martin's food store now, there's a little roving kiosk. You're going to see more and more automation, and the result of this is less people are going to have jobs. So that was pretty frustrating. We even had one of the two new socialists in the General Assembly. He called us intellectually lazy for not supporting this minimum wage law. And so that was kind of a low point. And that's, I think, just was the general feel of the session, unfortunately. But, you know, the governor, again, with his budget, you know, we got some good things done for Carroll County, and we're very happy about that. And no new taxes this year, and so those are two positive things. But the most positive thing of all is to be back home in Carroll County, and they can do no more damage for another year. Happy to be here, happy to answer any questions. If you want any additional information on the minimum wage, I know I'm going to have that in my session letter. I'm sure we all are, so if you want additional information about that, let us know, and we'll get that information to you. But thank you.
Delegate Shoemaker, please.
I think there's a recurring theme that you kept hearing up here, so that we're really glad to be home. So I'll certainly echo that sentiment. The fact of the matter is, Barry Raskovar, who's a political pundit, opines a lot on Maryland politics, said that this was the most, and he's pretty liberal, by the way. He said that this was the most left-wing legislative session in the history of Maryland. And that's saying something, I gotta tell you. So I think that is absolutely the case. As Senator Reedy alluded to, and my other colleagues as well, the centrist, more moderate Democrats down there who were in leadership positions either retired or were defeated in primaries, and we saw an appreciable shift to the left down there this year. And notwithstanding that, we survived. So that's a plus. There was a reference made to the Clean Energy Bill, or Clean Energy Jobs Act. Nice sounding title. Except when you look at what's going to be required as a result. People in Maryland right now, and the requirement right now is that 25% of electrical providers per portfolio be made up of renewable energy sources by 2020, I think it is. And we passed a law in the waning hours of the session that will accelerate that to 50% by 2030. Now, folks in Maryland already, as a consequence of the law that's in place now, if you're just a minimum ratepayer, you know, what 1 kilowatt or whatever it is, whatever the bare minimum is, you're paying $30-some a month more in Maryland because of that requirement than folks across the state line in Virginia. Businesses are paying a heck of a lot more than that. This is just going to accelerate that exponentially. It may create a couple jobs for some solar panel installers, but we're already at a competitive disadvantage in this state vis-a-vis surrounding jurisdictions like Pennsylvania, which is right next door to us. And that thing, along with the Fight for 15 bill, they call it, which is another innocuous sounding name, which will, you know, raise minimum wage to $15 an hour, which is double what our competitors are paying, is going to result in job losses for the state of Maryland. There were a lot of bills that wound up dying. Some very bad gun bills. Thank you, Senator, for all your help with that. Maryland has also become the first state in the country to ban styrofoam. So, but what all that bill does is put Maryland businesses at another competitive disadvantage with other states, because Walmart can bring in all their material from other states in the styrofoam containers that they've always used. And Amazon can send all their packages into Maryland using all that styrofoam and plastic shipping material that they use without being affected by the styrofoam ban bill. The only people that will be affected are Maryland businesses. And folks like Souders Eggs up in Hampstead would bear the brunt of that. So that's unfortunate. I think that got amended, though, with regard to egg containers. But still, I mean, we have a number of businesses in Maryland that use styrofoam that won't be allowed to anymore, while all the other 49 states will be able to have their material shipped in with impunity. So that's unfortunate. A big deal for the folks in the majority party was overriding the governor's executive order on starting school after Labor Day. I think that was silly, but they did it nonetheless. With regard to Carroll County specific things, I think we did have a good year. So it really was, overall, it was a mixed bag. We were able to do some things for our folks here in Carroll County. We were able to bring some bond money home, and that was at a premium this year because, you know, there were like 90-some requests for bond bills, and that's abnormal. Everybody wanted a bond bill to take home to their jurisdiction, and we were able to bring money home for like Carroll Hospice and a proposed new turf field up at North Carroll, which would be the first publicly accessible turf field in the county. Brought some extra money home for Boys and Girls Club and all their useful endeavors. So, and by the way, if you're over the age of 55, you can play bingo now without getting locked up. So that took a few years, but we got that done. So now in Carroll County, if you live in either an assisted living facility or an independent living facility, you don't have to schlep over to the senior center to play bingo. You can play bingo in the common areas of those facilities for nickels or dimes or quarters or whatever the case may be, and not have to worry about the sheriff coming in and taking you to jail. So all in all, it was a very interesting session. It ended on a somber note, of course, with the passing of our speaker. I'm understanding that we're going to have to go back in for a special session, which will be the first one of those I've had to go to, May 1st, to elect a new speaker. And meanwhile, I'll just get caught up on my law work. So thank you all very much. It's great to be here. God bless.
Thank you very much for that recap, and we look forward to doing this all again next year. I think we have a little bit of time for questions. So, John.
To all the delegation, I have two thank yous, especially for the turf field, bond bill, new turf field in Carroll County. Got a lot of athletes in here that play sports. It's very expensive, as you know. We schedule all these events, and great. The second thing was on the opioid crisis we have here in Carroll, which is huge. Keep chipping away at lawsuits with the state to the federal government on that issue. We had some success years ago with the tobacco industry on that, so that's a very high priority.
The Attorney General is engaged in that lawsuit. It's good, like tobacco, it may take a while, but I hope we'll see some progress at some point to get some help for what we're dealing with.
And Carroll County government has also done it on their own, filed a
That's
lawsuit,
right.
so that's good.
That's right. Any other questions? Okay. Well, in a moment, I'm going to turn it back to Suzette, but I'm going to take a little bit of self-time here to add on to what you were talking about, impact on local businesses. One of the bills that passed this year, which I was actually shocked, that got actually no attention whatsoever, was a sort of ban the box bill. So as of January 1st, if you have the question on your employment application that says, have you ever been convicted of a felony or a misdemeanor, you have to take that off. And you will not be able to inquire about that until the first in-person interview, not the first phone screen, not after you schedule an interview, which is what the state law says, but at or after the first in-person interview. And as I said, I'm actually surprised that got no media attention whatsoever, but that's a big change. The
interesting thing about that bill was, and I think we all voted against that bill, all of us have supported, there's a lot of restorative justice things that we've done in the past few years on criminal justice reform, because we know that trying to help people start their lives again and get second chances. So you would think, is this consistent with that? But actually what they've found in a lot of other states where they've done this is that people actually discriminate against people more because they kind of guess at whether someone seems like they might be a criminal. I'm not gonna spell it out for you, but and they found statistically that it actually makes people more timid. So the bill was, I actually think it comes from a good place, the person that put the bill in, but it's not good because it doesn't give you the discretion with who you hire. And so I think it's another one of these little regulations that is problematic.
Yep, Delegate Rose.
Just to tag on to that, and you're right, and that bill's it's gone through, they've been working on that for a couple of years. Sometimes it takes them a couple of years, and this year I think with the far left more people that they had enough votes to get it through, which is very unfortunate. But like you mentioned, and that's what I do in my normal life, and I'm happy to be back doing it, is recruiting and working in HR. And recruiting is and hiring people is one of the most expensive things that a company goes through. So it's one of those things where, like you say, you have to get to the point where it's the in-person interview. So you're talking about a factor of the monetary cost of your time, and that's something that they do not understand in a practical way, and it's very difficult. And there's another bill, and I'm not sure if that one went through this year or not. It's just a flurry of activity, but where you could not ask for on an application any longer the salary history, the salary history of an applicant, which they don't understand, and that's an important tool as you're doing your budgets. And it actually can have a negative effect on whether you might hire a young, maybe someone with a little less experience, because you balance that out with, if you've got a range of salary that you can do, you might have a really promising young person that maybe doesn't quite reach the threshold of the years of experience, but because you can bring that person on, maybe at the lower end of that scale, that provides an opportunity. And these are the conversations that we continuously try to have. But unless you're working in hiring or you have any experience in the business world or the corporate world, it just falls on deaf ears and they just don't understand the impact.
You're right, and my understanding is that bill died in committee again this year. And I think what a lot of people don't understand is that there are very few employers who base their salary offers totally and solely on someone's prior history.
Exactly.
You know, the impetus behind that bill, while good, is to try to decrease wage disparity, doesn't really do that. You know, and when the research and other places that have done that, it really doesn't do that. So, you know, salary is one minor consideration in determining what an employer is going to offer a candidate. After 30 years in human resources, I know that to be true. So, but anyway, so that's great. So thank you. Any other questions? All right, well, I am going to turn it back to Suzette for a few more remarks in closing. Thank you.
So now we have saved the best for last. No offense to the delegation, but without the generosity of our wonderful sponsors, we wouldn't be here today. So it is with my great pleasure to introduce to you the president of, I almost said Western Maryland College, I'm so sorry. Now I'm giving away my age to McDaniel College, Mr. Roger Casey.
Hey, we respond to both names, so we're happy with that. It's wonderful to host you here today on such a beautiful day. And of course, everybody knows it's always looking like this on our campus because we have a climate-controlled campus with a beautiful bubble over the top to make it always perfect. But it's really great to have you here. And especially, we're always honored to have our delegation here. These folks do great work on behalf of this county, but I can also tell you they do great work on behalf of education in the state, and particularly higher education. I feel incredibly fortunate. This is the 4th year that I've chaired the Maryland Independent Colleges Association, and I'm also the vice chair and incoming chair of the National Association of Independent Colleges, so I get to see what happens in other states too. And Maryland is a very special state when it comes to the support that the independent sector of education gets from the state, and these folks have been great supporters of ours. Last year helping us to renovate our kinesiology facilities with a $3 million bond bill there, and of course all of the work they've done for partners of ours like the Boys and Girls Club, Carroll Community College. So just on behalf of not only people here, but on behalf of all of the independent sector of higher education in this state, I just want to say thanks very much to you as well. We can talk later about making me an honorary member of the 1 in 10 club of people hurt by the tax law, and I'll be glad to chair that club for you. But I wanted to just say a couple of things about some things happening at McDaniel that we're very excited about. Some of you in this room were here with us this weekend. We celebrated the 100th anniversary of the ROTC on this campus. We're very proud of our military traditions here at the college. We've graduated 12 generals, and I think I heard a little hoo-ah back there, and so it's we're really honored by that celebration. I think many of you know that in honor of that, this year we launched a new scholarship effort to really help the children and families of military and veterans. And so any military family, the child of anyone who's active duty or a veteran, automatically gets a $25,000 a year scholarship here. That's $100,000 over 4 years. We cut the cost of college in half for military families as a way of saying thank you to you for your service to our community and service to our nation. That joins our other scholarship program we have, Educators Legacy Scholarship, for the children of K through 12, not only educators, but anyone who works full-time in K through 12 education. And that's also a $25,000 a year scholarship. So again, we're really trying to focus here on how do you help those middle-class families to be able to afford a really first-class educational experience. You probably saw in the newspaper recently about more partnerships we've formed with Carroll Community College, and we're very excited about those, trying to create a seamless pathway, particularly for young people who want to go into teaching, and keep those people here in Carroll County. So get your 2-year AA at Carroll Community College, come here, get your bachelor's, get a teaching certificate, stay here in the county, and we're really proud that 95% of the people who graduate from our program and become certified teachers are still teaching 5 years later. And if you know anything about teacher retention numbers, that's a remarkable number, actually, because teacher retention is less than 50% in this country now. And we're really delighted by that partnership, partnerships in our kinesiology program, and also a new engineering partnership that we're just about to sign as well there, to try to keep talented people here, educate them here, keep them here, and let's not have a brain drain on the great young people that grow up in this county. So thank you again to our delegation for all the work that they do. Thank you for the work you do on the chamber. We're delighted to be a partner with you. I would invite all of you back on Monday evening. This week we're having our McDaniel entrepreneurship program. We always have some great new ideas that our students come up with. They can compete for a $10,000 startup prize to launch their own business. And we've had some really nice businesses get launched with that. And a lot of these young people go on to compete in the Carroll Biz Challenge as well. And they do pretty well in the Carroll Biz Challenge also. So I really would invite you back to get a chance to see the future business and pick up a few future chamber members in the process. So thanks for being here today. You're always welcome on campus. And thank you again for all the work you do in Annapolis. So thanks a lot, folks.
Okay, we want to thank again Dana Blum and the delegation for coming. Thanks to the Legislative Committee. Thanks again for our sponsorship, McDaniel College, President Roger Casey. And thanks to the Carroll Community Media Center for taping us today. And again, the Carroll Biz Challenge applications are still being accepted now through the end of May. And we're taking applications for Leadership Carroll for class of 2020. So please see Peggy or Mike. Thank you all. There is a list of upcoming events on your table. I'm not going to go over those, so if you're interested, please check out your table. It's right in the center. Thank you. Have a great day.